why don't everyone just actually come back to Teams, because I'm gonna share my screen. We can just do this all
Okay.
in Teams. So just give me one moment here. Computer's not wanting to. Share the audio. All right, well, nonetheless, I think it's fine. All right. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Cool. All right. So 5D, we're rolling out kind of the, I guess, final to the first half of AR 303. This will act as, I suppose, our midterm presentation in a way. So I want to kind of briefly go over the idea of the pitch, and then we can talk about the brief and I guess the deliverables and kind of expectations that we have for you, and then when you're going to be presenting this. And then I guess just three kind of core concepts that I think will be helpful for this kind of next assignment. So, there's the idea of the pitch, right? I guess it's simply to engage someone. I don't like the idea of selling someone, but to have a persuasive kind of speech designed to engage someone in a short amount of time. Into an elevator cab and catch one of the directors or cinematographers and pitch an idea, and all they had was a very limited amount of time to essentially, I suppose, sell that idea. And many big time box office films have been created out of this. Now, I guess some of the examples I'm going to have are going to be super kitschy, and then some I think will be a little bit more meaningful. One of the examples, I think, of this, it's kind of evolved into the high concept pitch, right? So this idea of snakes on a plane. Snakes on a plane is basically the pitch. It's the tagline. It's the movie title, and it's also I guess the marketing technique, right? All in one, and it's synthesized into kind of this very kitschy but compelling and kind of graphic immediacy for the audience, and it created this almost like cult following because of how stupid it was in this idea. But I think it's important to just understand the concept of something being so simple that it's synthesized into the tagline, the movie title, the plot, right? It's everything. It's all. It is snakes on a plane, right? Okay, so the brief. I'm gonna just kind of read through this. This will be posted on Miro. We'll put it in Teams in the week 5 or week 6, whatever folder this will go under, so you'll have access to this. But I'm just gonna kind of read through kind of the summary and the deliverables of this idea. Okay, so in response to the projected housing demands for the year 2050, your team created a mini manifesto which describes a vision for the residents of San Diego and the rejection of past missed opportunities. Representational techniques of collage and diagram extracted latent potentials from your team site. Your swift and aggressive architectural insertions have reclaimed territories for future mass housing. The emergence of new dwelling topologies will necessitate an amendment to the San Diego Land Development Code. Your task in your current city lab teams will be to present these ideas in a public hearing to the City Council. Due to this uncertain time surrounding the recent pandemic, you will be presenting these ideas to your studio instructors in lieu of the City Council as a midterm presentation. Okay, so what we're asking is for a 300-second max presentation. I'll save you the math, that's 5 minutes, and that's going to be a hard 5 minutes, because you saw today how hard it was to get 9 teams in just to do any sort of desk crit with the amount of students we have. So keep it under 5 minutes. We're going to kind of cut you off after that point, and then there'll be kind of a discussion time after that, and more on this later. But essentially, this is going to be your City Lab teams will screen share a slideshow presentation via Teams. So exactly like I'm doing, right? Full screen, you'll have a presentation ready. And that could be a PDF InDesign, or it could be a PowerPoint presentation for you Mac users. It could be Keynote, right? And the presentation must include, but it is not limited to, and in any order. So we've have our manifesto, the written document, the visualizations, and at a minimum that is your collage and the field conditions. And then 5C, amend to San Diego Land Development Code. Now, what this is not is you are not just going to screen share your manifesto, because you can submit that in the files along with your visualizations and the amendment and the writing that goes along with that. I think that becomes a separate, almost like zine or something, right? That is compiled and delivered to us as a PDF. But for this, you need to be able to synthesize the ideas of the manifesto. And I think you could look back to Dawn's presentation last week, right? There was, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but there was minimum amount of text in his presentation, and it was more about the dialogue and the discussion and the ideas and the imagery that backed it up. So I think that's super important, that you are going to need to produce more drawings to back up the ideas of the manifesto. It cannot just be the visualizations that we have currently. And you're also going to have the LDC amendment diagrams that we're asking you to do today as well. But I think, we need to kind of rethink how you would present this. And here's another way that I think this is also essential to this presentation, but it's the 100-second short film. So we're asking you to make basically a 2-minute short film. And that could either be the beginning of your presentation, it could be the end, or it could be bookended by these other ideas from your manifesto, the visualization, and the amendment, right? So you're going to create a compelling film for your 2050 vision, synthesizing the manifesto, the field conditions, the insertion clause, and zoning amendment. They don't necessarily have to contain all those things, but I think they need to support those ideas. So I understand that you're not film students. I think Christian probably just perked up because he's probably really stoked on this assignment. But the equipment, right? It could be camcorder, so bust out that old skate cam or whatever it might be, camera, smartphone. You all have a camera of some sort. It does not have to be some expensive DSLR. It's completely optional. And in fact, I think you could be more creative at a low tech scale in how you do this. So software you might use is Adobe Premiere, iMovie, QuickTime. I don't even know what some of these software are. So I'm not even going to talk about them. But then Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram, you're all dropping stories onto your social media. It's the same way, rather than it being 15 seconds or whatever that might be, the length of that video. But you're presenting something to the world in a very short, crude amount of time. That's not necessarily refined. Now we're asking for something that's more refined, but I think the idea of stitching kind of these low tech tools to make a compelling story is what I think the creativity of this you'll really excel with that. So some of the expectations. Participation from all team members is going to be mandatory. So We'd like everyone to be able to present in this. So find a way. This means you're probably going to have to practice. How are you all going to speak? What are you going to talk about? It doesn't just mean that you're outsourcing. You're going to be image girl or guy, and you're going to be guy who does slideshow or whatever it might be, right? I think we want to have an active discussion with all the team members and to make that kind of clear. So this presentation is going to be very clear and concise, right? We'd rather it not be kind of just all over the place. There needs to be a well-defined issue. This goes back to what we were talking about today, just picking a singular issue, and more on that later. But it being objective and having somewhat of a proposed solution. I don't think you are going to solve this, but at least take a stab at what 2050 looks like, and how your manifesto and visualizations kind of support that. So minimum amount of text, like we were talking about earlier, emphasis on imagery and videos, drawings, diagrams, collage, etc. Persuasive argument using storytelling and academic references. Okay, so I'll kind of discuss some of these concepts in a bit. And then just some notes. The hyper-realistic renderings and the fly-throughs are going to be prohibited in this. So we don't want to see your case studies from OMA or whatever they are, and we certainly don't want to see any of your kind of proposed solutions doing some sort of like sponsored by Lumion fly-through. Like it's going to be distracting. So keep it image based. It's certainly also a film, so right, it could even be a stop animation or drawing over, and don't forget audio, right? There's a lot of components to this that make a really good film. And I can share a number of examples on Miro of some of these ideas. But so for Wednesday, we're going to have the storyboard due. So I'll make a frame for 5D, and we'd like you in teams, so your City Lab teams, I know 5C is due on Wednesday, but this is a really, I think, quick exercise. And really, this is the pitch, right? So the storyboarding is going to be your framework, not only to kind of create the structure for your argument and for the video, but it's also a really good planning tool. So to have this done well ahead of the Monday public hearing will be essential. So along with 5C, we're going to have you have your storyboards in teams, and we can talk about the logistics of that. And then we'll just do like a presentation or a walkthrough, or maybe there'll be some techniques or there's something on Friday. It'll be more kind of a loose schedule for that, but we'd like to see progress on the video. And then the public hearing and midterm presentation, I suppose it's the final presentation for this group of exercises that we've done, will be this Monday, May 18th. Okay, so like I said, this is a very tight schedule, but we're going to run it similar to, I mean, this is essentially a schedule of the city council. They're all public. You can go online, you can watch the videos of how these work. They won't be as formal as that, but I think it's important to take this really seriously. And in fact, I think we should have all the webcams on for each group, right? So there's some sort of like human connection. So dress appropriately for that. And so anyways, we'll have a quick attendance and an invocation led by the studio instructor. Sorry, we can't do the Pledge of Allegiance. It's not enough time. We typically would. And then we're going to go over the amendment to the city of San Diego and your proposal. So this will be your presentation of the manifesto, the visualizations, included with the video. 5-minute presentation. This is like a hard 5 minutes, remember, and then we're going to have 18 minutes of discussion. We'll go through 5 teams. We'll have a break, and then we'll come back for the remainder of the 4 teams. We'd prefer if everyone was engaged the entire time next Monday on the call for these, but it'll just be each team who's kind of have their webcams on and their audio on, and we'll kind of go through this as methodically as we can. But also put this up in Miro, and we'll ask you to sign up for your individual team slots. We didn't necessarily put this in any particular order, so GBC or whoever, right? You can just plug in here if you prefer a time, but we prefer that you are ready to screen share if you're team 3 at 4:56. Okay, like locked in and ready to go, because I know that we've been going over every day, so this is going to be a little tough to stick to the schedule, but that's the goal. Okay, so just quickly, I want to go over kind of 3 concepts that I think might be helpful for storytelling. And kind of every great story has these 3 concepts. Some of them are incredibly cheesy, I'm sorry, but then some are more meaningful. And I think will provoke you all to create, I think, a more compelling video and to think about this in a different way. So the first idea is every great story is going to be universal. And so what do I mean by it being universal? These could be I guess a shared experience, or the idea of like collective memory, right? So or it really boils down to the human condition. So that would be growth, emotion, conflict, and it's a bit tough to unpack because it really boils down to almost the meaning of life in a way. But there is always some sort of universal concept that can engage the audience. And in reality, all art forms, in a way, the good art forms, capital A, take an experience that you've had in life and find a way to evoke that feeling, the same feeling that you had within that experience, to the audience, right? So I chose this painting by Rene Magritte titled "The Human Condition," because he's trying to create almost a commentary on this idea, right? This is a painting of a landscape, and essentially, as the spectator, we are both inside the room, but we are also outside, and the representation of the outside is so realistic that they end up blurring both ideas. And what his commentary of this is really that the outside world that we view, we can only represent it, I guess, internally, in a way. And it is our goal as storytellers to kind of evoke the representation of a shared experience to the audience, right? So that they're as one, as this kind of drawing is depicting, right? So stories are universal, right? They have that string that that can connect anyone who views it. So sorry for the cheesy reference, but every great story kind of has this like story spine. Okay, so what I mean by this is that there's a hero, right, who has a problem and meets a guide, and the guide gives them a plan, and they have like a call to action, and that call to action is either gonna end up in failure or success. Okay, so in terms of Star Wars, you have Luke, who's our hero, and by the way, you are not the hero ever in any situation as a storyteller. It is always going to be your audience. You're essentially the guide. So Luke is our hero, and he has basically 2 problems in a way. One of them being that there's an evil empire, and the other one is that he doesn't know how to like beat the evil empire. Okay, so along comes the guide, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he gives him a plan, right? He's like, okay, you need to trust the Force. And what's the call to action? Okay, go destroy the Death Star. And that's going to either result into the demise of the rebellion, or it's going to result in the destruction of the Death Star. So spoiler, they destroy the Death Star, right? And it is a very corny example because Star Wars dumbs this down in a way that the story arc is almost one wave. There are kind of mini waves, but it is really very linear in this sense. Now, I use this image of the oscilloscope. So this is a way of graphically depicting electromagnetic waves over time. So I bring this up because naturally there are multiple waves within a more complicated story that's not necessarily overly complex, right? It's this the idea of it being linear in direction, right? There's going to be a start and there's an end to your film, but it's sinuous in nature. So this almost goes back to what we were talking about the dialect last week with Don about that there's almost in dialogue you have an up and down sinuous nature in the way we speak, and we could call them the mountains, we could call that the red, and you could call the valleys as the blue. And naturally as humans, we alter between mountains and valleys even when we're having a discussion. And typically the person that you would have the discussion with, when you're dipping down into the blue, there's kind of this moment of pause, and that is when they kind of interject, and you have this kind of sinuous relationship back and forth, but not always, because sometimes you could be on a walk and you're both kind of peaking and you're both red and you're talking about the same thing, and then you both naturally fall down into a blue and there's just this moment of silence. Sometimes it's awkward, sometimes it's really peaceful, but that can happen also in film. They could either be coinciding, there's this sinuous up and down, but sometimes there's overlaying plot lines that are on top. But this is going to be a short film, so we don't necessarily want an overly complex idea. It's really, you can just follow a simple story arc to create your short story. Okay. And then finally, I just want to end on the idea of it being simple. Okay, right? So it's universal, there's structure, and it's going to be simple. So this is Richard Serra, East, West, West, East in the Qatar Desert. It's an installation in 2014. And I kind of want to play off the discussions we had last week of minimalism and post-minimalism. And almost the idea that the minimalists, right, we're stripping the object of everything, not as necessarily a commentary or a political commentary or social commentary, even though Richard Serra, I think early on in his career, was making some social commentaries within his work. But oftentimes, as Stan Allen was talking about, that you are pulling meaning from an object. And creating the spatial field between the viewer and the object, right? So the art itself is really about the human and the spatiality between that human and the object. And Richard Serra himself would say that he does not make just objects, right? He makes an object with a subject. So without that subject or the person, like a human connection, there is no artwork. So it's a very simple idea, but I think it comes back to the idea of how do we engage with the human, right, to create more of a persuasive argument for the thing that we are trying to engage them in. Okay. So finally, there's kind of this really, it's a great example of a simple campaign, but it's very cheesy, incredibly cheesy. And I'm not sure, because my audio wasn't working, I'm going to play this. And we can just kind of unpack the issues. It's just a 30-second clip of, this is the Your Brain on Drugs by the, what is it? The Partner of Drug-Free America campaign in the 80s under Reagan. They produced a number of these drug videos as a way of kind of engaging young teens during the war on drugs. So I'm going to play this. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to hear anything.
Is there anyone out there who still isn't clear about what doing drugs does?
Can you hear this?
Okay, last time.
Yeah.
Good.
This is your brain. This is drugs. This is your brain.
Yummy.
Any questions?
Okay, so like so lame in a way, but like super compelling, right? Like, so I think if we were to like unpack this, like, okay, so there's a universal idea of this being almost like unrestrained self-indulgence in a way. Right, but there's like a moral ethical dilemma of like drug use that we could get into a whole debate of this, but they are trying to create that connection between kind of the universal human condition of kind of this moral dilemma of whether we should be using drugs or not. Right, it's incredibly simple in the idea that they're just saying, okay, the brain is delicate as an egg, right? And you can either keep it intact or you can crack it and put it on drugs or whatever, and it's going to scramble it, and it becomes totally irreversible. But there's still a structure to it, right? So there's like a hero, which could be the kids or the teenagers, whoever they're directing at, the guide, who is essentially the U.S. government in this sense, that's coming in and being like, okay, this is what we need to do to avoid the future being completely scrambled. And they have a plan, right? Just say no. Call to action is don't do drugs. And that's you're either going to do the drugs or you're not going to do the drugs, and that's going to end up in a scrambled brain that's irreversible, or you're going to have a nice healthy brain, right? It's super cheesy and it's super dumb, but it's done in 30 seconds in a way that in fact is like really provocative. And this is actually kind of universally agreed upon as one of the best ad campaigns that has ever existed, just because of how quick and provocative it really was. There's a number of examples that I don't know how we need to move. Okay, here we go. I put a number of examples onto our Miro board. Those will be uploaded. Just some few ideas. We don't have enough time to go through nearly any of these, but there's some really good examples of just kind of different concepts within the short film or directions you could go, right? The tone, style, in various story arcs and structures that you can kind of pull from just for some inspiration. But I just kind of wanted to briefly go over that because I know that this may be a difficult task because you're not film students, but I think if you break it down into the storyboard and kind of these three concepts and be able to synthesize your manifesto and the imagery, that you can put together a really kind of compelling presentation for next Monday. So all of this will be up on our Miro board shortly. Okay. Do we have any questions, concerns?
So you
Does that make
basically want the
sense?
video like the 5 minutes, or you just want a little bit of that video, or how do you want it?
I would do a 2-minute video, keep the video short, and then the remainder of the 3 minutes would be a presentation.
Okay.
So, you know, find a way to link both of both the presentation and the video into one kind of cohesive presentation with all 5 or 4 group members involved.
Okay. Thank you.
I need to look at the deliverables again, but we're doing a short film and a separate presentation as well, correct? They're not.
They'll be together. So the 300-second max presentation, it is your manifesto and your visualizations and your amendment synthesized into either a short film and a series of visualizations that back up those things, right? So you could just talk about the manifesto within the short film and then back it up with a series of visualizations that are going to kind of make your argument to the city of San Diego of why this should be rezoned the way you are crafting it. Okay, so you are creating a problem within your manifesto, and you're providing a solution. And how you present that idea, there just needs to be a 2-minute short film involved in this presentation, but it doesn't necessarily have to be just that. And we'd actually kind of preferred if it was both the dialogue and this in this video. Does that make sense? So everything you've done for the past 2 weeks are kind of synthesized into this presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Okay. Well, I'm sure. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions once you start the storyboarding. I think that's going to be kind of essential, and I really see that as being the pitch. I know we're saying that the pitch is the final presentation, but really I think the pitch happens on Wednesday, right? Like, so what is the tagline to the manifesto and the field conditions and your amendment? Like, can you simplify it into such a way that you can create a pitch for that and then a storyboard of the idea of how you want to present it?
This is a communication exercise, guys. I was reading an article by this guy. I was in the New Yorker about the Epidemic Intelligence Service, EIS, a group of highly specialized practitioners that respond to epidemics. They're a world-class group and they've been in operation for some years. Who were also consequently eradicated from all diplomatic power under the Trump administration. But one of their core principles is that according to in terms of this pandemic, is that it's a communication emergency as much as it is a medical crisis, and that's what I think. What we're want to see from you guys is. And I'd like the idea how you arrange this, Tony, in the sense that we're asking kind of everybody to participate in this. Why? Because it's for your own good. The communication is really powerful. It can really make or break your career. It could free you from in terms of what you want to do in your life. I have a friend that works at a firm who's not an architect, but a kind of public relations person that says, yeah, I'm always looking for architects that want to just join my group and get away from Revit for a while, and they're going to get paid a lot more. Who could communicate and talk about architecture to promote the firm. So I think that I just wanted to add that. Thanks, Tony, for this presentation. I just wanted to add that we want to seize this opportunity to develop your communication skills. I think you guys can all agree that, I mean, it's tough, right? It's tough to speak verbally, to communicate verbally. Some of us are more have more aptitude than others. I myself, when I was your age, was very shy and would have struggled with this too. But it took a lot of practice, a lot of exposure to finally become comfortable communicating. So we want to provide that for you today. For this exercise, we want to give you that opportunity. We would like to model that behavior as instructors also. We try to do that as well as possible. And yeah, so thank you, Tony, for that. And that's all I had to add to that.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I mean, communication is key. I mean, Don's right. Like, you can hide a lot of skills that you may be lacking in Photoshop or Revit or whatever it might be in the professional world, by just being a good communicator and like
Yeah.
looking people in the eyes and smiling and just trying to engage in conversation. It's
Yeah.
90% of the job that we do. Do we have to communicate to consultants, to your client, to your friends, to your family? Like it's just it goes down to this idea of the human condition. Like it really is. Like we need to be able to communicate.
Yeah.
Yeah. First of all, Tony, and that was excellent. Thanks for sharing that insight, but also with assembling a comprehensive catalog of samples for us to kind of comb through. I would second Don's take on this being a communication exercise. I think the even a step further or before the communication part is probably to be able to identify exactly what you'd like to say. Not like literally, but say, what is this project actually about? And why would it be relevant? I'd say maybe another component would be to provoke with a message that say, why does this even matter? So and I think that's sort of embedded perhaps in the manifesto with the problem statement, that there is a problem, there is a concern, and there is something that needs to be done. But I think the format is what might initially appear as being very rigid. I think it's actually very flexible other than the time. So that you're operating within a given time constraint. And I think the way to look at it will be you have a total of 300 seconds. How you use the 300 seconds is up to you as a team. As part of the 300 is also the 100-second short film. So so that's right, a minute and 50 seconds. Try to model or use this as the limits of the sandbox that you're working in, and I think it should help synthesize a lot of thought. And by the way, I think today's conversations were fun to participate in. I think we've made a lot of headway with a lot of projects in terms of being able to synthesize what it is that we're after and how the building code could facilitate that. So I think that's not to forget that part. I think the comments and questions that we have from today. So I would see Wednesday's pinup or discussion as a kind of real critical date to understand where the team's head is and how you want to pitch this. So take a moment and maybe set up a kind of dry run in terms of message and headlines as you kind of unpack or unroll the narrative. It's a process of editing primarily, in addition to being a communication process.
The more you can share with us on Wednesday, the more we can provide feedback for. So if you don't come prepared, then there's not much you can grow from that experience. So keep that in mind also. Do you guys know what a storyboard is? What is a storyboard?
It's a sequence of actions.
Sequence of actions. How is it represented usually, Christian?
Pictorially. You can have a pictorial storyboard which has images that represent what you want it to show, what you want the that scene to represent, and it can include the shot, the angle the shot's taken at. It can include information like that, and then a brief description of a brief written description of what's in that scene, and then the and it's just like that, a sequence of all the scenes, and then you're gonna usually want to tell a story, so you're gonna want some rising action. You're gonna want to, yeah. Anyways.
Great. And that's the way to plan your film, right? Is to kind of stake out each shot or each scene or each whatever you want to call it.
Yeah,
phase.
each climax, each rising action, each key element that you want to portray.
Could be very specific. It could be a laundry list of what elements you need for each shot. You know, what media, what do you need to track down, what equipment do you need for each key scene.
Yeah.
So use that. That's what we'll want to be able to look at on Wednesday, right, Tony? And so get, you know, that can be just hand drawn, that can be just sketchy, that can be stick figures, and it's really can be very, very crude. But get something in front of us on Wednesday so we can look at it and respond to that.
Yeah, and I think this can be carried over even to, and in fact it is we often as architects and designers storyboard the drawings that you're going to do before you present them, and sometimes it's just blank sheets that have a title on them, as a cartoon set, right? It's a way of planning ahead, and I know a lot of people just reject the idea of like, I don't need to do that. I know what it is. I've got my list here, but it's like it's very helpful to visually see the framework that you would have in a storyboard format. Christian said, so you guys mentioned using our own cameras. Are you wanting us to incorporate footage from our own homes or areas? That part confused me a little bit, if anyone understood it. Okay, so it is confusing because you could film things. You could go outside, socially distanced, and film something. You can use stock footage. I'll maybe on Wednesday, I'll give examples of areas where you can find royalty-free stock footage things that you could just chop together. That's one method. The other method is you produce your own drawings and you speak over it within kind of, they could be still images, or you could do a stop animation. So this could all happen digitally on your computer, or you could, film within your own house, and you could stitch different the frames together into one video. And look at how some of these shows that are continuing to go on air, live shows, are stitching together film footage to keep the shows going on, right? Like Saturday Night Live, like they're still continuing, but there's a lot of players involved that are in separate locations. So I don't know. That's just, there's one of many ways of approaching this, but don't think that it needs to be some like epic movie in 2 minutes with a fancy camera. Like this is a chance to just be creative and convey the image. I mean, if you watch 2001: A Space Odyssey, the first maybe like 5 to 10 minutes of that movie is straight darkness. You are looking at a black, it would never fly today in 2019, but it is just black, and it is epic classical music blaring for like 5 minutes straight, and you think, is the DVD stopped? Is it broken? What is happening? But it gets such a like a visceral reaction out of the audience that they don't have an image. It's just darkness and noise, right? So it could just be audio. There's a lot of ways to approach this. So, and I think when you watch some of the examples I gave you, this might make a little bit more sense. But we don't necessarily, it doesn't need to be as polished and refined as that. And we don't expect that. That's insane in 1 week.
I think I just thought of an example that sort of operates on that has multiple layers or messages sort of embedded is the EAMS, the powers of 10.
Oh yeah.
And that is it's of 1977. The technique's very simple, but I think just the power and the combination of text and image, and I think it still gets used in today's sort of science classes to explain the powers of 10.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll add that to our Miro board of video archive. Yeah, it's a great example.
Always tricky. I think we to kind of read the silence, assuming that I think the wheels are turning. I'd encourage that you follow up with your team, have a game plan, brainstorm through it, go at it, and then let's follow up on Wednesday with initial takes.
Yeah.
Any last questions from you guys before we tune out?
So on Wednesday, you want to see the initial pitch and like what we took from today's discussions and everything, or crit, and give you the direction of the one direction we want to do in comparison to like the zone requirement, etc., or not just specifically the zone requirement.
Yeah, it's a good question. This is for the instructors. Do we want to kind of emphasize on Wednesday? What are we focusing on? Do we want to kind of focus on the pitch, and within it, maybe within that conversation is hopefully embedded a certain direction that's clear now for some of you that if it's not clear today, right? Does that make sense? Is it more of an emphasis on kind of the storyboard, and within that storyboard hopefully is embedded like a clear understanding of your project direction?
Yeah, at least for me, I see it as like 5 C's do, so let's pin that up on that frame with your teams, nice and neat and orderly, no more Wild West Miro board. Let's get that pinned up, and then I think the storyboard, if we all pin up in the 5D frame, we can then, this is a chance for all the groups to rethink tighten up the manifesto, tighten up the visualizations, and obviously you'll have your 5C done. And then I think it'll naturally, it has to get tighter when you do the storyboard. So that way we can kind of go through each group and we'll be able to talk about all the ideas through that I think storyboarding process.
Does that answer your question, Luis?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Other questions?
I have this little outline that helps you like formulate your story for like to film whatever you want, like movie, commercial, whatever you want. So like I can post that up in the chat. So like if you guys if anyone wants to download it, and like you just fill it out really, and it kind of just has the outline of what you want, like what kind of scenes you want. But
okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Thanks, Christian.
And Christian, just from what I saw last quarter, I know you're interested in film, so I think this is an open invitation for the rest of the studio to kind of pick your brain. So reach out to Christian for thoughts. If you have no idea about anything with film, reach out to each other. And it's a competition in the sense that we are going to be picking one kind of rezoning. But we want all these presentations to be tight, and to all succeed in this, because I think this is going to be a really important exercise, like Don said, about your communication skills.
Other questions, guys?
So what happened?
Yes, we're at the example videos that Tony showed us on Miro.
They'll be up. I'll do it like in the next 10 minutes.
Okay.
I was just trying to keep the focus on Teams right now.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Okay, well, if that's it. Thanks again for a fruitful class. You guys have anything else to add?
No, I share that.
Yeah.
Thanks
Okay.
for what do you call it? A colorful discussion?
Yeah.
Definitely. Plenty of color.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Cool.
All right.
All right, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you.
Lemonade.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Tony.
Thank you.
Yep.
See you
All right.
Wednesday. Thanks, Tony. See you guys.
Yep.
See ya.
See you Wednesday, everyone.
All right. Ciao.
Thank
Bye.
you all.